Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed, as well as the latest episode of American Gods. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I cleared the time and start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Charmed, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of American Gods. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Charmed. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break them down. First and foremost, we have the whole complicated situation between Maggie and Mel. The whole thing of like, Maggie feels like Mel is getting more distance from him because it's like, oh, she's having this other life with Jada. And I think as an empath, obviously she's feeling it more. Obviously, Mel learns about Fiona and everything, about like what this all came down to. It's basically because she's the keeper of the flame, and apparently she has immortality. So the elders, she wasn't someone they could control. She was scary. So because it was something they couldn't control, they decided to banish her to Tartarus because that was the only way to get rid of her. And it turns out, because I figured Harry didn't know, but it turns out even Charity didn't know. But Fiona still harbors feelings against her because it's like the fact of the matter is you still chose to side yourself with the group that did this to me. Now, in retrospect, I'm kind of skipping all over the place. I do apologize. That might be why she killed Marisol, because she found out. Because she says that whole thing to... Because that was a twist. I didn't see that coming. I was like, oh, who's it going to be? And it's like, Charity. Like, was Charity being controlled or something like that? I mean, granted, she snapped that elder's neck at the end. So it's like, I doubt she's being controlled. It's more like she killed... Because she had that conversation with, Macy being like, oh, she saw things one way of like, oh, there's all this evil. And then just, there's good and there's evil. She never saw the layers of gray that there was. And for her, she's like, I'm starting to change my mind now. I think when she killed Marisol, it's because she found out maybe Marisol ended up telling her the truth about Fiona. Like, she's only now finding out about it. And so she ended up snapping. So she went after all these elders who had the part to play in all of that. Because Fiona hasn't been released that long, so it's not like she had anything to do with it. That must mean that Charity had something to do with it. Like, because she probably found out, like, oh, these elders have all been, like, she killed elders that had something to do with evil. Like, they did some shady stuff, like resurrecting her daughter with demon blood. But then it's like, oh, wait, your daughters are the charmed ones, so I can't really do anything to them necessarily, because she probably would have killed Macy if she had the chance. We might even find out the twisted thing is that she might have been the one that led to Macy dying in the first place as a baby, that led to her getting resurrected, potentially. I mean, but then again, why would she, though? Because, like, at that point, she wasn't a demon. It wasn't until she got resurrected as a demon. So, never mind, struck what I just said. But I could only assume, like, maybe each of the elders she killed had done some shady stuff, and her being kind of like this overcorrection of right ended up, like, this ultimate absolute good. She killed people who had done some form of evil, but now she realizes, like, there's shades of gray, that everything isn't so black and white. Maybe, potentially, I don't know. Maybe, like I said, it would make sense if she found out about her sister, because it's like, because this entire time she thought her sister was dead, so that might be something she's been carrying this entire time. I don't know. Because that's the thing, like, if that's the case, like, she's been killing elders, but it's not like she's been going at large chunks of them. She's only done a few at a time, starting, I'm assuming Marisol was the first one, but at the time it was like her and like two others. Maybe they're the ones that were directly connected to Fiona getting put in Taurus. Maybe, like I said, I don't know. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. But along with this, we end up finding out about that thing down below. It's called the Vortex. Basically, it fuels, like, makes people more powerful, which is interesting because, like, it seemed like one of them, like, when it was activated, it seemed like it did something to Fiona. It seemed like it boosted her power or something like that. But it boosted Maggie's power as an empath, and that means when it's boosted out of their own control, she could switch bodies with somebody, and she ends up switching bodies with Mel, because they had the whole thing of, like, because, Mel is like, oh, look at you being oversensitive, which, to be fair, it's like, hey, being very sensitive like that kind of comes with being an empath. But for her, it's like, you don't trust Jada. I trust Jada easily. The fact of the matter is, she can be trusted, and then getting mad at Maggie for deciding to rush again. It's a whole thing. And I love, like, it's like, Maggie trying to pretend to be Mel and everything, and her and Jada kisses her, and she's like, wow, now I see why I'm so into you. And it's like, wow, Jada must be a really good kisser for even Maggie to be like, whoa, that's crazy, that's interesting. But I also love it. It's kind of interesting too because she was Mel, so she ended up, Jada kissed her, but she ended up kissing Parker later on, which is weird. Which I love that thing of like Parker's making a move on her. She's like, "Ew, gross, I'm Mel," and he's like, "Oh, we're playing role play." It's like, how twisted that role play is? It's like, oh, let's have some fun time. I'm gonna pretend to be my sister. That's weird, dude. I can't believe that's where his mom was like, "Oh yeah, you into roleplay? Okay, let's do." It's like, no, dude, no, that's crazy. It's kind of interesting because literally every one of the sisters had an issue this episode, because obviously Macy's worried because she was thinking like, "Hey, I'm the one turning people to stone," but it's like, no. We later on find out it's like, because it's like, oh, maybe it unlocks some power within her. Like, oh yeah, your mom had premonition, so maybe you are too. I'm like, oh, that'd be interesting, because it's like, not only are you the older sister who's supposedly supposed to be the half sibling, but now it turns out you're actually the full sibling to Maggie, which is so interesting because I'm sure that probably plays a part in it too, because it's like Maggie and Mel are drifting further apart, especially considering the fact it's like, oh yeah, it turns out we spent our entire lives growing up together, but it turns out we are the actual half sisters, so it's just an extra layer upon it. I just thought was kind of interesting, but I love the fact is that but it turns out it's an evil side because of her demon side. It's not like a latent ability inside of her because of just like, oh, it's, their mom's power. It's like, no, it comes from her having a demon side thing. So I'm like, dude, that is so cool. Like, not only this, because, and like, a lot of fiction and stuff like that, I think demons tend to be cool and stuff like that, especially when they're the good guys. When they're not assholes, they're cool. Like I said, one of my favorite characters from the original show was a demon. It was Cole. Just because I loved him and Phoebe. Their relationship was so complicated, and even when it was all said and done, I always kind of felt bad that Cole's story played out the way it did. Nevertheless, the fact is, it's so dope that she gets an ability like that, because now it makes her a little more empathetic to demons. It's like, I can see, like, once again, things aren't all that, black and white, because we found out Medusa's case in this episode, also her being like a witch and everything. Which, side note, that must be true to her mythology or something like that, because there was another show, I want to say it was Blood Ties, that referenced her background being like, oh yeah, Poseidon raped her, and kind of basically being slut-shamed into like being cursed. It's like, oh, how dare you. It's like she was the one that was assaulted, but she got punished for it. And I was like, damn, dude. And that's like what this is all about, because Daphne was getting slut-shamed, and so she needed, she was so devastated by it that Medusa appeared before her. And that's interesting too, I think, because Macy's situation in general made her sympathetic, because it's like, because I'm already got a bit demon in me, if I turn more demon, would you guys kill me? And Harry and them are like, Harry and Jerry, they're like, no, it wouldn't come down to that. But it's like, if it did, you probably would, because it's like, it's for the greater good and all that. Obviously they wouldn't want to do it because she is a charmed one, and that'd be a whole complicated thing on its own. So, but it did make her sympathetic. And it's kind of interesting because it's like Medusa only turns those who turn away from her, because people looking away from her, it brings back that shame she already felt about her whole situation. And Macy had to be like, I see you. I see the pain that you're in, that, women like you and Daphne have been put in these situations. Like, you can let go of all that pain. We're going to try and set things right. And I thought that was kind of a beautiful message for the episode, because it's not just, Medusa's situation, because of Medusa's story. Because obviously there's real life applications for it to be like, people who feel shamed about what happened to them. In this particular case, like Daphne being with someone, it ended up kind of turning like, oh, like she gets shamed for it. And the cool thing was Lucy was like, oh yeah, we're not going to tolerate this shit. And Parker was like, yo, if you're part of this stuff, you can get the hell out, of the fraternity as well. Because it's like, we don't roll shit like that. So I thought that's kind of pretty dope. Because it was kind of interesting, because I think even Mel kind of got surprised. She's like, whoa, wait, you're actually... Because I think she thought in her head, like, oh, Lucy... But Lucy has morals and standards. Like, Lucy may seem like, kind of superficial and stuff like that, but she has a heart and a head. Like, the fact of the matter is, if shit's kind of wrong, she'll call it out. It's like, yeah, she seems like they're kind of in their own little lane and stuff like that. But I think it's because of Mel's perception of, like, fraternities and stuff like that, them being such a, juvenile thing in a certain regard, just like, oh, they have no standards. It's like, no, you can easily see that with Lucy's decision in this regard. But the situation, obviously, I think it does end up bringing Mel and Maggie closer, just because because they have been drifting apart. This has brought them closer, because it's like, Mel now understands like how strong Maggie is, because it's like, dude, you literally have to deal with everyone's emotions and thoughts in your head, and you're able to just deal with it. I'm just exhausted from it, but you were able to handle it. But Mel Maggie now realizes, like, wow, the elders aren't really that great. They've done some super shady shit. And now it's like, I understand why you trust Jada, because Jada is kind of on the right side of things. And that's the thing. I don't know. Like, the Sarkana seem like maybe they aren't that bad after all. I think it is just kind of a misunderstanding on both sides. Like, it could have easily been someone lied about the Sarkana. Hell, maybe that's even why, Charity went after them, because like these people were sympathetic, the elders that were sympathetic and willing to listen to that, but it's like for so long she thought the Sarkana was purely evil, so maybe might not even be about the Fiona thing. Maybe she doesn't know about Fiona, but just knowing like, oh, you might be siding with the Sarkana, like you might be, because Marisol was working with the Sarkana, so for her it's like, I have to kill them because you're evil, once again it's like her thought of, like, because she made such a point to explain that to Maggie, like, Macy, that, like, hey, I used to be full absolute, like, oh, evil has to be stopped, like, there is just, you are either good or you're evil, that there were no shades of gray, so it's going to be interesting to find out what ends up happening beyond that. It's also going to be interesting going forward, considering the fact is that, Macy has the, evil eye ability. That's definitely going to be something interesting to see kind of going forward. It was almost shitty of that elder, though, kind of showing you, like, how far they're willing to go, because she throws that Nina. It's like, you could have asked for permission, let her know ahead of time. It's like, no, you kind of did it in spur of the moment type of thing, so it kind of shows, like, you're willing to do whatever, but for her, it's like, we finally get the answers about who has been the one who killed your mom, as well as the other elders, so... Now, this is also going to hurt Harry, too, because let's not forget him and Charity were a thing at one point in time, so... Now this is just going to prove Mel's point more about you can't necessarily trust the elders, but then it's kind of like, whoa, that's probably just on Charity, but you could make the argument that Charity is probably a byproduct of the way the elders have kind of run things for so long. To be fair, the Sarkana could be a situation where it's like they weren't an evil group. Yes, they want to be progressive in certain regards, cut through a lot of red tape that the elders get so caught up on and think this is crossing the line and that. But it might be a situation where Fiona gets so consumed by rage and anger and revenge that she might start crossing lines that even other people in the Sarkana, even Jada might, and even Mel might be like, whoa, you might have to slow this down. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see ultimately where everything ends up taking us in the next episode. But I'm so interested to see what ends up happening with all of this. To finally understand, like, okay, what's Charity's reason for doing all of this? And what will Fiona do once she's fully healed? Oh, yeah, and there's also that whole point we should also keep thinking, too, about Parker's dad being the one manipulating Lucy into manipulating Parker and Maggie. And it's like, oh, you two are so cute. I'm shipping you two together so hard. Two. Because obviously, like, you haven't cut back to that, but it's still, you see Lucy being so happy. It's like, oh, I'm so happy for you two being together, because subconsciously she's being forced to kind of do that, because it's like they need to be closer and closer together. It's so interesting because, like, obviously that's all connected to the source of all evil. It's so interesting because that's happening while this other stuff is happening. So it seems like the source of evil storyline, which I think is kind of arguably like the main storyline in a certain regard, is kind of background to all this other, like the Sarkana and everything with the elders. It's just so interesting how the storyline ends up being like that. We'll see ultimately whether everything ultimately ends up being connected. The elders, Sarkana, like Parker and his dad, like all that ends up being potentially connected to the source of all evil or not. Like I said, we'll just have to wait and see. And also that room, the vortex, like we're going to see more of that. I hope so, because if Mel gets in there, her freezing ability is going to be crazy. The fact of the matter is, like, I wonder now that her ability's been awakened, like, would that, like, because obviously it just happened to tackle like that part of her ability, but I'm curious, like, will it tackle her telekinesis in any shape or form? Would it end up helping unlock stuff that's there within Mel and Maggie? What's also interesting, like I brought up earlier, is like, well, what does that mean for Fiona? Because a lot of the witches have their own unique abilities and stuff like that. Like Jada has a whole electricity thing, Charity has her thing as well. It's like, but once again, like, what's Fiona's unique ability, and what did that symbol do? Like, was that symbol connected to something that was helping her recover? And it's like, oh, I'm awake now. How and why did it affect her the moment they entered it? That's what I'm not sure about. I mean, cause, well, it was also interesting too because of the particular symbol that was activated was Maggie and Parker going in there together potentially. Maybe it was activated by one of their abilities or both of them or whatever. Maybe that is connected to the source of all evil too, because it's like because him being half demon, half human plays a role in him being, you know, this host for the source of all evil. Like I don't know. I'm just guessing at this point in time. Like I said, enough of me talking. We would just have to wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode of American Gods. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We have Shadow, obviously, you know, picking up where last week's episode left off. We have Shadow being taken by Mr. Town, who, interestingly enough, turns out to be played by Dean Winters, which completely throws out my thought of like, oh, maybe it's... Yeah, I figured it was stupid, but it was just something that was randomly popping in my head. But nevertheless, Dean Winters, who... The things I'm kind of best known for is like he's popped up in SVU, Law and Order SVU, like early days, and then later on in this... points in the show he pops up again, but also like the Allstate commercials, there's that. But he ends up being Mr. Town, and the whole point of this is because Mr. Ward is curious, like, why the hell are you so important to Wednesday? Because you seem like a nobody, so what's so important about you? And it's interesting because we actually get a look into Shadow's past, something we haven't tackled at all. And I think that's kind of interesting because a lot of season 1 was setting up a lot of gods and stuff like that, and I think it's kind of interesting because it seemed like this season, at the very least with what they did with this episode, makes you almost think Shadow's going to be the main focus of it potentially. I mean, obviously, because it seems like he's the key to Wednesday's plan and everything. But what was so fascinating was, obviously, the fact is, like, him and his mom, apparently they've been kind of all over the world, and they came to America. Obviously, there's complications in that, because for Shadow, it almost kind of feels out of place, because everyone just assumes this and that about him, of, like, you know, that was so interesting, because, like, the boys who beat him up, as well as the cops, his mom was basically being like, the fact is, they're all afraid that you're going to take away what they want, and he's like, that's not who I am. It's like, for them, it doesn't matter. They already kind of think they know your story, so it doesn't matter to them who you really are. And it's so interesting because, like, she brings up the whole, like, you have to know who you are, which he's like, how am I supposed to know that? Because there's a side of himself he still doesn't know. He knows everything about himself from his mom's perspective, but not about his dad's. And that was even something Mr. Town was kind of pointing at. It's like, the fact of the matter is, beyond your mom and your wife, we can't find any other things about you. And that's the thing, like, what about his dad? And his mom is just kind of like, your dad, he's dead, let's just kind of leave it at that. And it's like, huh. What's interesting, though, is, because, well, we see him kind of learning the coin trick that he kind of does, you know? He learned it from some guy. Some guy was near him and he just up and vanished. And I was like, okay. So it kind of seems like it might be leaning itself into what I might have thought in season 1. Because my running thought in season 1 was like, Shadow must be like a god or something. And Mr. Wednesday is going to try and bring out that god. Like, I figured he couldn't have been human. Because, I mean, that was initially because I thought all the stuff, you know, because early on, all the stuff, all those faceless people that basically Laura had so brutally dealt with, I was under the impression maybe that was something inside of Shadow that did that, like some of his godhood coming out or something like that. I thought maybe that was kind of the whole point, but obviously it seems like it's more so like, oh yeah, like all Wednesday want is for Shadow to believe in him, but once again, it's like, why him amongst anyone? I thought maybe it's just because Shadow is someone who has such little belief. I mean, if anything, it's kind of interesting because you would think out of anyone you'd want to convince Laura, because she seems to be the biggest atheist amongst that, which we'll kind of get to that in a second. But the fact is, it's like, maybe because Shadow's on the cusp of believing, all you have to do is push him in the right direction. I don't know. Just even the way Wednesday went about it, because Wednesday needed him to believe, and he had to go about it slowly but surely to kind of slowly bring him into this world so it doesn't become so overwhelming he doesn't believe it. So it's like, is it just that, or is there more to Shadow? Because the fact is, his mom kept referencing, oh, there's a light in you because I put it in you, put it there in you every day. But let's not forget, that's the same thing Laura sees anytime she looks towards Shadow. So it can't just be, because I was under the impression it's just because of the coin thing that she saw the light in Shadow. It seems like there is more to that. Like, I guess because she's already crossed over to the other side and come back. I mean, because obviously she doesn't look at anyone else like that. I mean, we've never saw through Laura's eyes towards anyone else, just Shadow. But I guess that's why, because he is her light and everything. So it's like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, there's got to be something extra there. So that's why I'm kind of starting to think, like, is that supposed to be like he's a demigod or something? I mean, because at first I was like, is that supposed to be like Wednesday? But it's like, no, Wednesday can't be his dad. Maybe Wednesday's his grandfather, maybe one of Wednesday's kids, because Odin's had a few kids and stuff like that. We haven't heard them kind of brought up, but maybe one of his kids had Shadow or something like that. So maybe like he's looking after his grandson or something in a weird way. I don't know. Because it would kind of also make sense because, like, his mom was like, oh, yeah, he's gone. But then again, who's the person that taught him the coin trick and everything? Like, I have no idea. Because you would think if it was Wednesday, he would have remembered, not unless it just... I mean, to be fair, this probably is stuff he probably hasn't thought about in such a long time, so he didn't really put it together. But there's definitely something there. I'm just not sure what. And there's a lot of interesting things else that went down. Obviously, the conversation between Mr. World and Bilquis, I really like that. Because for her, she doesn't want to get involved beyond this. And I like the conversation of, like, if she hadn't given the speech that she did, all it would have done was when the time came, like, when Mr. World had his attack on Wednesday, it would have just fortified, you know, Wednesday's hold on people, and they would have just went more to his side. But because of everything going down the way it did, now the other gods are in hiding. And I loved what Mr. World said of like, oh, like the fact is the best way to kill Wednesday's Hydra is to gather up all their heads, tie up all their heads, and basically get them all in one chop. I even love the whole situation of, because obviously Bilquis doesn't want to be a part of this war and everything. It's like, I did what I did because I owe you a favor and stuff like that. But beyond that, I don't want to be a part of this war. You know, like love being such a great weapon in war, but like war and love being on opposite sides of the coin, never to meet, you know, when it comes to battle and stuff like that. But I love when Mr. World putting it to where it's like, the fact of the matter is you've betrayed the old gods and turning your back on the new gods. When it's all said and done, aren't you, you know, if you don't choose a side, you might get trampled by both. At the very least, if she chose a side, at least she'll be protected from that side. And the other side, well, hey, we'll look after you and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting because it's like, I guess she didn't think that far in advance of like, because you know, she just did this because it's like she's in a tough spot. She owed them for kind of revamping her, giving her power again. And now it's like, now it seems almost like you have no choice because you can't go to the old gods because after what you've done, you've already betrayed them. They won't take you back. So she has no choice but to join the new gods. So and kind of Mr. World kind of put her in a corner like that. I would also love that line from Mama G and just being like, fine, you kind of put me in this corner. Like, you brought this war to my doorstep. So the fact of the matter is, yes, I will spill blood and stuff if I can find someone to cover my shift. That was kind of interesting. And also all that stuff Chernobog was talking about. I completely forgot to talk about that last episode, the curse and stuff he put on. Like, obviously, like, you can tell it's alluding to Laura being the one to put him down, which, to be fair, that curse came true in this episode. So it kind of comes full circle. Like I said, I just can't believe I completely forgot about it because he was referencing someone dead was going to be the one to put him down. It's like, yep, it was totally Laura who did it, so... but I do love that. It's so interesting because Wednesday knows more than he ever lets other people know. Like, he has a lot planned. Because the whole point is he sent Laura and, you know, Mads to go potentially rescue Shadow. But he was like, oh, yo, have faith in your man. Saying, like, you know, have faith in Shadow. But which is interesting considering the fact is it seems like that's what Wednesday was up to anyway, him and Nancy. They were going to go trying to rescue Shadow anyway. So it's like, why not just tell her that? Maybe for him it's just kind of like, oh, maybe some stuff will happen along the way to you or whatever. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Why not fill her in? Why not tell anyone your plans? I love the whole Wednesday and Nancy thing. Especially when he was like, he asked me if I want something to eat, and he gonna come back with some fried chicken. It's like, okay. I don't think he meant that, but I can see how fucked up that can be. And I love him throwing the chicken out the window. And then Wednesday's like, oh, what happened to the chicken? He's like, oh, it was so good. Thank you, thank you. I'm like, I love that. And when he's trying to sacrifice his car at the end, Nancy's like, Valhalla, we ain't going to no fucking Valhalla. I'm gonna meet you at the place, and just walks away from the car and stuff like that, which I love that whole thing. It kind of makes sense in retrospective. Like, obviously there's these gods walking around basically looking human, so obviously a lot of stuff tied to them will be manifested as other objects. Like, it turns out his horse, his steed, is actually his car, just, you know, in a more modernized form, because obviously, like, Ifrit and Selim are going off to find his Gungnir, his spear, which is definitely going to be interesting. Beyond that, I'm curious. Like I said, I'm so curious to see what the whole Selim storyline comes down to, because it almost seems like, you know, because Ifrit doesn't want him to come along, but it's like, hey, I have faith in you, because obviously he has his own reasons for being in this battle. So I'm curious what those reasons are, and you know, it just seems so interesting because Selim is like the only normal potential human in all of this besides Shadow, and even then Shadow's situation is questionable at best. But it's like Selim and the Jin, Ifrit. It's like, what's going to go down in that route? I'm interested to see where that takes us. I love the tech kid. I didn't realize when, like, Mr. World was talking about media, I didn't realize he was referencing Jillian Jacobs' character from last season. I didn't realize that's who it was, but in retrospect, it's like, of course, because that's her thing. Like, screens and stuff like that is her place of worship, And I love the tech kid being like, oh, you're here hiding. Yeah, Wednesday scared the shit out of you, and now you're hiding. She's basically like, I'm not coming out until I'm ready. It's like, Mr. World wants you, and it's like, if you don't come, it's going to be an issue for me. But she tries to run from him. He's like, yo, I am the greatest creation. The fact of the matter is, you can't hide from me. He's like, so I'm going to basically give you a minute because you don't want me to hunt you down. And even he was like, well, shit. Because I'm sure for him, it's like he was kind of hoping things would work out. But it's like, the fact is, it wasn't that easy to kind of convince her to come back. Or maybe it's just because it's just like, okay, so now I actually have to follow up on my threat of actually tracking her down potentially if she doesn't come through. I think that might be a thought process behind that. But that was so interesting because I was like, right, because we haven't seen her since season 1's finale. That was the last time we saw her because Odin went into overdrive and, Astara did her thing too. So I guess a combination of that, just kind of like, I guess she didn't really expect Odin to kind of have that much, kind of thought of him as a dog, all bark, no bite. I mean, that's kind of the way Mr. World kind of treats him as well. So I think he's kind of taking him a little bit more serious now, but nevertheless. But I love a lot of, best duo, Mads and Laura. And it's so interesting, just the continuation of his bad luck and stuff. I even love Nancy being like, oh, you're the most unlucky leprechaun I've ever met. And he's like, bugger yourself. And he's like, bugger yourself, motherfucker. No, bitch, is what he said. Me just ad-libbing stuff. But nevertheless, I thought it was kind of interesting, that whole conversation. And that's what I was bringing up before. It's like, Laura's the most, like, obviously she's an atheist and stuff like that. But for her, it's like, I don't believe in God. For the fact of the matter is, all you guys, no matter what your situation is, you were made by someone. So I don't think of you guys as, like, these top-tier people and stuff like that. And if she's like, even leprechauns, like, what do? You take and you take and you take. What kind of leprechaun are you? Because you don't give anything back. And he's like, that's funny coming from you, the woman who got her husband arrested, then cheated on him, with his best friend and everything while he was doing penance and stuff like that. For her, it's like, it's not a crime, adultery and stuff like that. And, Mads is like, where I'm from, it's the greatest sin of all. Then that whole cow situation, it's like, well, there, you can thank me. And they immediately run over a nail. And it's like, Mads has the worst luck. I even love it that Laura's lifting up the car and then drops it on his foot. It's just further proof that her situation is pretty dire because she's starting to decay more and more. Essentially, she's losing her super strength, which is interesting. I guess that's supposed to be representative of the fact is that her body is close to going back to death. Because the moment, because obviously Mads even brought it up last season, eventually that her skin is just going to get to the point it just completely falls off and everything. I mean, to be fair, she hasn't had any limbs removed, or at least fallen off lately, so that's good. She hasn't gone also Santa Clarita diet with, her eye popping out of its socket yet. Once again, yet, so... But when they do seem like they reach the end of the road, it almost seems like she has given up. But even it's so interesting because Mads keeps telling her, keep going. The fact of the matter is just because the road ends, it's like, why? It doesn't seem like it is just about your coin. I guess because for him, it's like, I am kind of the one that killed you, so that kind of is on me. And what's also interesting is, I guess the whole Essie situation, I guess that plays some role in it. Because obviously we got those flashbacks in the same episode, he was having, moments with Laura and stuff like that. So it makes me wonder. I mean, obviously, I doubt it's a coincidence that it's the same actress, Emily Browning playing both of them. So it's like, maybe there's something there for Mads as the reason why he goes so for Laura because of the whole Essie situation. I have no idea, That was kind of my thought back then, but I still don't know if that's true or, does Mads have his other reasons? Because obviously for him, he's just tied up in this situation until he finds a battlefield to die on. It's kind of like he's kind of owed that because he ran away from the battle. He was supposed to die on that battlefield. And I love him being like, I'm not going to die in a battle over Shadow Moon. But even with that being said, he still does what he's supposed to. He still sticks with Laura, and that whole going through the horde situation was interesting. I love even Laura being like, that's some shit. That's super messed up. Which I guess that's supposed to be like a little space in between space, because even him being like, yeah, it's going to get a little tight, and I guess it's just kind of a space that he kind of walks through potentially, getting from one place to the other typically, and maybe it's just not the most comfortable and easiest thing to do, because even he was screaming out in pain, but maybe that's because he was holding on to Laura, which made it even tighter in there. Either way, I was also about to say, like, oh, you really about to jump on a train, Matt? But I get, well, because it doesn't seem like even being close to his coin doesn't bring him good luck, because obviously the nail in the road and everything, so... But obviously him and Laura kick some serious ass. I love that. Also, like, her squishing that dude's head, and, like, Shadow seeing that and stuff. She's like, I had to, for you. Because I think for her, like, this is the first time Shadow's seen what she's capable of. Because, once again, Shadow still doesn't know. Like, she kind of referenced it, but she never outright was like, oh, yeah, when you were hanging, that was me who... Because she was trying to hide it from him, because I think she didn't want him to look at her like a monster. And so I think that same thing applies here, and she's like, oh, I hope you don't look at me differently, and like, you're the love of my life and everything, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes, because I'm sure, because Shadow had said that last episode, I want to believe in you too, and now seeing her like that, I don't know if that's going to change his mind about things when it comes to Laura. It's kind of sad, considering the fact is that she is back from the dead, trying to get you back, essentially. It's almost like some weird love song when you actually think about it in the long run. Almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing, tragic yet romantic in its own way, So I'm very interested to see what goes down that route. Obviously, like I said, it's interesting. I guess because Wednesday wanted to rescue Shadow because to kind of bolster, it's like, because it's like, oh, you don't really matter in all this, but it's like, oh, you do, because Wednesday came out of his way to save you. It's like, that's how important. So for me, I guess that's why he didn't want Laura or Mads to know what he was up to, because he wanted to be the one like, hey, Shadow, my boy, I saved you, because he wants to be the one that gets all the glory, because if the stronger Shadow's belief in him gets, the more, I guess, because once again, it's like, it's not even worried, because he's not even worried about getting other people to believe in him. It's just Shadow, like, because obviously the other gods are focusing on getting as many people to believe in us as possible, but it's like, you focus on this one human. And once again, it's the question Mr. Town brings up, that Mr. World wants to know, why are you so important? Like I said, I'm banking on the whole demigod situation, but we'll have to ultimately wait and see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.